The author in Cabin 3, Chapter 1. Hiding from the World. The famous author arrived at Silver Pine Inn using a fake name. Unfortunately, she was terrible at it. Claire Montgomery realized this about 7 seconds after the woman stepped through the front door. Not because Claire recognized her. She didn't. It was because normal people didn't wear oversized sunglasses during a snowstorm. The woman stood in the lobby wrapped in a long black coat, grey scarf, knitted hat, and enough nervous energy to power the Christmas lights outside. Claire smiled from behind the desk. "Welcome to Silver Pine Inn." The woman jumped slightly. "I have a reservation." "Wonderful. Last name?" The woman froze. Then she cleared her throat. "Parker." Claire checked the reservation book. There was no Parker. The woman quickly added, "Jane Parker." Claire looked again. Still no Parker. There was, however, a reservation for Cabin 3 under the name Charlotte Reed. Claire glanced up. The woman had gone very still. Claire knew that look. It was the look of someone hoping the floor might open politely beneath her. Claire smiled. "Cabin 3?" The woman's shoulders dropped. "You know." "I know the name on the reservation." "Charlotte Reed," the woman said quietly. "Yes." The woman slowly removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, blue, and wary. "That's me." Claire nodded as if best-selling authors arrived under false names every Tuesday. "Cabin 3 is ready." Charlotte blinked. "That's it." Claire tilted her head. "Should there be more?" "Aren't you going to ask about the scandal?" Claire studied her for a moment, then she slid the guest card across the desk. "You seem tired." Charlotte's expression cracked for half a second. "Yes," she whispered, "I am." "Then let's start with your cabin." Before Charlotte could answer, the kitchen door swung open. Emily Chen stepped into the lobby carrying cinnamon rolls. She stopped so fast one roll nearly slid off the tray. "Oh my God!" Charlotte closed her eyes. Claire sighed. "Emily." Emily pointed. "That is Charlotte Reed." Charlotte gave a small wave. "Allegedly." Emily stared at Claire. "Do you know who this is?" "Yes." "And you're just standing there?" "I was checking her in." Emily looked horrified. "I've read every book she's ever written." Charlotte opened one eye. "That's either very kind or very concerning." Emily laughed. For the first time all morning, Charlotte almost smiled. A few minutes later, Claire walked her down the lantern path toward Cabin 3. Snow drifted softly through the pines. The cabin sat beside a frozen pond, warm light glowing through the windows. Inside, a fire crackled in the fireplace. A small Christmas tree stood near the window. On the table sat coffee, cookies, and a handwritten note, "Come in from the cold." Charlotte stared at the note longer than she meant to. For weeks the world had demanded explanations. Her publisher wanted silence. Her agent wanted statements. The internet wanted a villain. Charlotte wanted a door she could close. When Claire finally left, Charlotte locked the cabin door and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence felt unfamiliar. No notifications, no headlines, no cameras, just snow falling outside and firelight flickering across the room. For the first time in months, nobody wanted anything from her. Charlotte Reed had come to Silver Pine Inn to disappear. She had no idea she was about to be found. Chapter 2. The Bookstore Owner. After breakfast, Claire suggested a walk into town. "There's a bookstore," she said. Charlotte nearly laughed. "Of course there is." Silver Ridge looked like a Christmas postcard. Snow covered the rooftops. Wreaths hung from lampposts. The bakery window displayed gingerbread houses. Then Charlotte saw the sign, "Carter's Books." She stopped outside. Bookstores used to be her favorite places. Lately, they had become complicated. Still, before she could change her mind, she stepped inside. A bell chimed overhead. The smell hit immediately. Books, coffee, old wood, comfort. Charlotte closed her eyes for a moment. She had missed this. Not publishing, not fame. Books. The reason she had started writing in the first place. She wandered through the shelves until she spotted a display of winter romances. One of her novels sat in the centre, The Last Letter at Lavender Hill. Charlotte stared at the cover. She remembered writing it years ago in a tiny apartment with a broken heater and cheap coffee. Back then, success had seemed impossible. Now, success felt complicated. "I recommend that one." The voice came from behind her. Charlotte turned. A tall man carrying a stack of books nodded toward the display. "You've read it?" she asked. "No." She blinked. "Then why recommend it?" "My customers like it." "That's not the same thing." "No," he agreed, "but it keeps the lights on." Charlotte fought the urge to smile. "You own the store?" "Ben Carter." "Of course he did." "Jane." The lie came automatically. Ben extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Jane." She shook it. His grip was warm. Charlotte immediately regretted noticing. "You really haven't read it?" "The romance novel?" "Yes." Ben shrugged. "I mostly read history." Charlotte stared. "History? History? That's boring." Ben laughed. "There it is." "There what is?" "The judgment." Unfortunately, he had a point. Ben picked up her book. "Worth reading?" Charlotte hesitated. "Depends." "On what?" "Whether you like happy endings." Ben smiled. "Happy endings are overrated." Charlotte frowned. "That's a terrible thing to say in a bookstore." For a moment they simply looked at each other. Then Ben held up the novel. "Maybe I'll read it." Charlotte felt a strange jolt of panic. "You don't have to." "Now I'm curious." That made two of them. As she left the bookstore a few minutes later, snow drifted softly through the town. Charlotte should have been thinking about the scandal. Instead, she found herself thinking about Ben Carter, and that felt far more dangerous. Chapter 3. Tea with a Stranger. Charlotte did not plan to return to Carter's books. She told herself that 3 times before lunch. By 2 o'clock, she was standing outside the bookstore again. The bell above the door chimed when she entered. Ben Carter looked up from behind the counter and smiled. "Back already?" Charlotte lifted her chin. "I wanted to make sure you weren't mishandling my recommendation." "Your recommendation?" "The romance novel." Ben held up The Last Letter at Lavender Hill. "I started it." Charlotte tried not to look too interested. "And it's better than I expected." "That is the most insulting compliment I've ever heard." "I'm still learning." A sleepy orange cat stretched in the front window. Ben nodded toward it. "That's Milton. He judges everyone." Milton opened one eye, looked at Charlotte, then went back to sleep. "I respect him," Charlotte said. Ben laughed. Then he moved toward a small kettle behind the counter. "Tea." "I don't drink tea with strangers." "Smart. Coffee." "That's the same problem." "Hot water?" Charlotte stared at him. Ben grinned. "That one is less suspicious." Against her better judgment, Charlotte smiled. "Tea is fine." She sat near the window while Ben made 2 mugs. They talked about books first. Safe things, covers, old bookstores, why people kept buying paperbacks even when e-books existed. Then Ben said, "You seem like someone who used to write." Charlotte's fingers tightened around the mug. "Used to?" "You talk like stories matter, but also like they hurt." She looked down. "That's annoyingly observant." "I own a bookstore. I'm professionally nosy." Charlotte looked out the window at the falling snow. "I wrote once." Ben didn't push. That made it worse somehow. After a long silence, she said, "Then people started caring more about the person behind the story than the story itself." Ben's voice softened. "That sounds lonely." Charlotte looked at him. No clever answer came, because he was right. She set the mug down. "I should go." Ben nodded. but his expression was gentle. At the door, she paused. "Keep reading the book." "I will. And don't skip to the ending." He smiled. "Wouldn't dream of it." That night, back in cabin 3, Charlotte opened her laptop for the first time in weeks. For a long while she stared at the blank page. Then she typed one sentence. The woman came to the mountains because the world had become too loud. Charlotte stopped. Her heart beat hard. Outside, Silver Pine Inn glowed softly through the snow. For the first time in months, she wanted to know what came next. Chapter 4. The Secret Comes Out. Charlotte almost didn't go back to the bookstore, but the next afternoon she found herself standing outside Carter's Books again, staring at the window display. She told herself she was only taking a walk. Her feet clearly had other plans. The bell chimed as she entered. Ben looked up from behind the counter. "You know, most people just admit they like a bookstore." Charlotte removed her gloves. "I like the tea." "Of course." The corner of his mouth twitched. Charlotte hated how much she enjoyed making him smile. A few minutes later, Ben was shelving books while Charlotte wandered nearby. "How's the novel?" she asked casually. Ben glanced at her. "You mean the one you're pretending not to care about?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure." He slid a book onto the shelf. "I'm halfway through." Charlotte tried very hard to sound uninterested. "And?" Ben looked thoughtful. "The characters feel real." That surprised her. "Real?" "They make mistakes." "They're supposed to." "A lot of books don't let people be messy." Charlotte looked away. Somehow that felt less like a comment about the novel and more like a comment about life. The bell above the door chimed. A woman hurried inside carrying a phone. "Ben, did you see this?" He looked up. "See what?" The woman held out her screen. "It's all over social media." Charlotte's stomach tightened immediately. She knew that tone. Ben frowned. "What is?" The woman looked at the screen, then at Charlotte, then back at the screen. Her eyes widened. "Oh." The bookstore suddenly felt very small. Ben noticed the change. "What?" The woman lowered the phone slowly. "That's her." Charlotte closed her eyes. For 1 second she considered running. Then she remembered she was 38 years old. Running seemed dramatic. Unfortunately, so was her life. Ben looked from the woman to Charlotte. Confusion slowly gave way to understanding, then surprise. "Jane." Charlotte swallowed. "My name is Charlotte." The silence stretched. Ben stared. "The author?" She nodded. "The author." The woman with the phone backed toward the door. "I should go." No one stopped her. A moment later the bell chimed again. As she left, the bookstore became very quiet. Ben set down the book he was holding. "You wrote this?" He lifted the last letter at Lavender Hill. Charlotte nodded. "Yes." "The Charlotte Reed?" "Unfortunately." Ben laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You told me to read your own novel." Charlotte looked down. "It sounds worse when you say it out loud." His expression tightened. "You could have told me." "I know." Instead of sounding angry, Ben sounded disappointed. That was somehow worse. Charlotte looked toward the door. "I didn't come here to trick anyone." "Then why lie?" The answer came easier than she expected. "Because I was tired." Ben's expression softened slightly. Charlotte continued. "Tired of being recognized. Tired of being judged. Tired of every conversation turning into the same conversation." The bookstore remained silent. Finally, Ben looked at the book in his hands, then back at her. "You really thought I'd care more about the headlines than the person standing in front of me?" Charlotte didn't answer, because the truth was, yes, that was exactly what she thought. Ben sighed. "That's sad." She laughed bitterly. "Welcome to my year." For a moment, neither spoke. Snow drifted softly outside the window. Milton the cat stretched in his chair. The old clock near the register ticked quietly. Normal sounds, a normal afternoon, yet somehow everything felt different. Charlotte grabbed her coat. "I should go." Ben nodded. This time he didn't stop her. Charlotte walked out into the snow. The cold air hit her face immediately. She pulled her scarf tighter and headed back towards Silver Pine Inn. Halfway there, her phone buzzed, then again and again. Messages, notifications, alerts. Someone had recognized her. The internet had found her. Again. By the time she reached cabin 3, her peaceful little escape felt very far away. She closed the door behind her, locked it, then leaned against it with her eyes closed. For a few wonderful days, she had almost forgotten. Almost. Now the world was knocking again, and this time she wasn't sure she had the strength to answer. Chapter 5. What the World Gets Wrong. Charlotte spent the rest of the afternoon in cabin 3. Her phone remained face down on the table. It buzzed every few minutes anyway. Messages, articles, notifications, people she hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly wanting to talk. She ignored all of it. Outside, snow drifted quietly across the frozen pond. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than it had the day before. The knock on the door came just before sunset. Charlotte didn't move. A second knock followed, then Claire's voice. "Charlotte?" Charlotte sighed. "Come in." Claire stepped inside, carrying 2 mugs. "Tea?" Charlotte looked at the mugs. "Is that the official Silver Pine solution for everything?" "Mostly." Claire handed her one and sat near the fireplace. For a few moments neither spoke. Finally Charlotte broke the silence. "I'm leaving tomorrow." Claire nodded. "Because of Ben?" Charlotte stared into her tea. "Because of all of it." Claire waited. That was one of her talents. She never rushed people. Eventually Charlotte continued, "I came here to disappear." "That's true. And now people know where I am." "Also true." Charlotte looked up. "Aren't you going to tell me not to leave?" Claire smiled softly. "No." That caught her off guard. "No?" "You can leave if you want." Charlotte frowned. "That's not very persuasive." Claire shrugged. "People rarely listen when they're being pushed." The fire crackled. Outside, the wind rattled the porch railing. Charlotte looked toward the window. "What if everyone is right about me?" Claire tilted her head. "Everyone?" "The internet." Claire laughed quietly. "That alone should answer your question." Despite herself, Charlotte smiled. "Only a little." Claire noticed. "Tell me something." Charlotte waited. "Did you make a mistake?" "Yes." "Were you rude?" "Yes." "Were you angry?" "Very." Claire nodded. "Congratulations." Charlotte blinked. "For what?" "You're human." Charlotte looked away. "It doesn't feel that simple." "It never does." The room fell silent again. Finally Claire stood. Before leaving, she paused beside the door. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're running from the internet." Charlotte frowned. "Then what am I running from?" Claire smiled sadly. "The possibility that people might still like you after knowing the truth." After she left, Charlotte sat very still, because somehow that felt far more frightening. Across town, Ben Carter sat alone in his bookstore. The novel rested open on the counter. He had tried reading. Instead, he'd reread the same page 4 times. Milton the cat sat nearby, looking disappointed in him. "Don't start." Milton blinked. Ben sighed. The truth was, he wasn't angry, not really. Hurt, maybe. Embarrassed, definitely. But mostly he felt stupid. Charlotte hadn't lied because she wanted to fool him. She'd lied because she was scared. And if he was honest, he would have done the same thing. The bell above the door chimed. Hank Walker stepped inside carrying a paper cup. Ben groaned. "Oh no." "What?" You only visit when you're about to say something annoying. Hank smiled. That's fair. He set the coffee down, then nodded toward Charlotte's novel. You finish it? Almost. And? Ben looked at the cover. It's good. Mm-hmm. I know what you're doing. Hank ignored him. She's leaving tomorrow. Ben looked up immediately. What? Hank smiled. There he is. Ben rubbed his face. I don't need commentary. No, but apparently you need help. The old man headed back toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. People are usually more than their worst day. Then he disappeared into the falling snow. Ben stared after him. The annoying thing was, Hank was right. That evening, Charlotte sat beside the fireplace in cabin 3 with her suitcase open on the bed. She had packed half of it already. One sweater remained folded neatly on the chair. The rest of her things sat scattered around the room, proof that leaving felt harder than it should. Her eyes drifted toward the laptop on the desk. The document remained open. One sentence. Just one. The woman came to the mountains because the world had become too loud. Charlotte read it again, then again. Outside, snow continued falling, soft, quiet, patient. For the first time all day, her phone stopped buzzing. The silence felt strange, comfortable, dangerous, hopeful. Charlotte wasn't sure which. A knock sounded at the door. She looked up, her heart suddenly beating faster, because somehow she already knew who it was. Chapter 6. Writing the next chapter. The knock came again. Charlotte stood from the chair beside the fireplace and opened the door. Ben Carter stood on the porch with snow on his shoulders and a familiar book in his hand. The Last Letter at Lavender Hill. I finished it, he said. Charlotte folded her arms. And? Ben smiled. I hated the ending. She stared at him. Then he laughed. I'm kidding. To her surprise, she laughed too. Some of the tension disappeared immediately. Ben stepped inside and closed the door behind him. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ben held up the book. I came to apologize. Charlotte looked down. I lied to you. You did. And you had every right to be angry. Ben nodded. I was angry. The honesty made her smile. But mostly, he continued, I was embarrassed. Charlotte looked up. Embarrassed? I spent days talking to a best-selling author about books without realizing who she was. Despite herself, she laughed. Fair. Ben's expression softened. I should have asked why you were hiding instead of assuming the worst. Charlotte felt her throat tighten. I wasn't trying to trick you. I know. The room fell quiet. Outside, snow drifted past the window. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Ben glanced toward the suitcase sitting on the bed. Are you still leaving? Charlotte followed his gaze. The suitcase sat half-packed. One sweater remained folded on the chair. She looked around cabin 3, the fireplace, the Christmas tree, the frozen pond outside. Then she thought about Claire, Emily, Hank, and the man standing in front of her. Finally, she smiled. I unpacked a sweater. Ben grinned. That's a good sign. I think so. He stepped closer. Not too close, just enough. Charlotte realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being known, not of being seen, not by him. Ben reached for her hand. She let him take it. You know, he said, I have one complaint about your book. Oh? The hero takes too long to kiss the girl. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. And how would you fix that? Ben smiled. Like this. The kiss was gentle, warm, unhurried. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Outside, snow continued falling over Silver Pine Inn. Inside cabin 3, Charlotte felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The next morning, she sat at the writing desk by the window. Her laptop was open. The cursor blinked patiently. For weeks she had been afraid of the blank page. Now it felt like a beginning. Charlotte placed her fingers on the keyboard and started typing. One sentence, then another, then another. Outside, Silver Pine Inn slowly came to life. Claire welcomed new guests. Emily baked cinnamon rolls. Hank complained about a shovel. And in town, Ben Carter placed a handwritten sign beside a display of romance novels. It read, "Recommended by a former romance skeptic." At the centre sat The Last Letter at Lavender Hill. When Charlotte saw it later that afternoon, she laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. And for the first time in a very long time, the laugh felt completely like her own. Charlotte Reed had come to Silver Pine Inn hoping to disappear. Instead, she found something far more dangerous, a reason to stay. The end. If you enjoyed this visit to Silver Pine Inn, please subscribe and join us for the next romance, the next adventure, and the next guest who arrives carrying a story of their own.